Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the session, Maitri Sitaraman.
There you go. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Leonid, to this conversation at GLOBSEC 2021. Leonid Volkov is, of course, the Chief of Staff to Alexei Navalny and currently the face of FBR and in D.C. at this moment, at an opportune moment right after the Biden-Putin summit. Leonid, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. The first question I think we all would like to know and understand is, has anyone, considering all the news flow of this week, been able to speak to Mr. Navalny since he returned to camp? How's he doing? And how do you think he feels about Mr. Putin not giving any guarantees on his life going forward?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. My pleasure to be here and to talk at this event. So we are still able to be in touch with Mr. Navalny. So his lawyers are allowed to visit him Monday to Friday, and that's our connection. There are no bad news about his health condition, and this is good news given all the circumstances. So the fact that he's been transferred back to the torture colony, to a penal colony with a very bad reputation on his birthday on June 4th. But so far, the situation is stable. He's not yet aware about the press conference that the presidents had after the summit because there is some delay in delivering news to him, but I'm quite sure he will also comment on this. So we have a channel to get feedback from him, so he would dictate his notes to his lawyers, and they would publish them on his Instagram account later. So I believe later this week we'll hear something back from him.
Leonid, you have been doing the rounds in DC for garnering support. Were you at all surprised by any of the comments from both presidents yesterday?
It was not about garnering support. It was about conveying our message. So we have a message. We had a message to deliver, and we have it. And so we also had the feeling that there was kind of a lack of policy. So there is nothing like a real developed policy on how to deal with President Putin and on like everything with the new wave of repressions against political oppositions in Russia on chemical weapons and so on. So I came to Washington, D.C. kind of to offer our perspective about the policy, and I have a feeling that many things that we were trying to deliver, well, were heard. So people were eager to listen. We had many fruitful conversations here. And I have a feeling, just a feeling, that this also somehow reflected also in the remarks after the summit in Geneva, and in something that has been also delivered to President Putin. We will know probably better in a few days. So when we'll have actually more information about like what happens there in the meeting room and what will be the next steps, the possible consequences. Our advice was always that President Biden should take strong, powerful position on President Putin, and that there is one most important lesson learned from all the past years, that there is no such thing as a reset button. That unfortunately, every time the West is talking about red lines, Putin is only reaffirmed that the red lines do not exist. Every time that the West is trying to find compromise to build bridges, Putin is only reassured that he can do whatever he wants. And he only considers it to be, unfortunately, a sign of weakness. So, and our policy recommendation was to try something else, because like trying to push a non-existing reset button has been tried for many years without any success. So it would be wise to try something else. We have a feeling, also based on how angry President Putin was after the meeting and how dramatically arrogant were his remarks on Mr. Navalny, how many lies he produced in a very short period of time, including assuming that Alexei Navalny deliberately left Russia to violate the conditions of his provisional sentence after being poisoned. It, I think, shows that, well, Putin was kind of pushed off balance during his meeting with President Biden, that he probably had to confront quite a strong position, quite a strong argument. And that's good news.
I'm going to tell our audience, both online and right here in the room, that you can put your questions to Leonid. You have three ways to do this. In the room, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, come to the mic, and very quickly ask your question. We don't have a lot of time in this session. You can also do it online via the GLOBSEC app, and of course, you can do it via Zoom through the virtual studio. So just to leave that with you, we have a question in from our audience, which makes my life quite simple, Leonid, because I was going to go there. The parallels with Roman Petrosevich and his arrest and the ability of the Belarusians to parade him in front of the media. I know Mr. Navalny dedicated his recent award to people, political prisoners in both Belarus and in Russia. Ilya is asking, what would your advice be to Belarusians at this point as they take on the question of what's going on in their country?
Sorry, no advice. The countries are different, political situations are different, and every historical and political parallel could be dangerous. I very much believe that Belarusians much better know what to do and how to deal with their situation. We, of course, follow the situation with a lot of compassion and respect. And I mean, we are both now really brother folks, with this being endangered by crazy dictators. But still, I prefer kind of not to give any advice that could, lead to also negative consequences, because I don't feel the political situation in Belarus so good as leaders of Belarusian opposition feel it. And it's important. So I've been asked many times, okay, you're based in Vilnius now, why don't you meet and talk with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and that people? And I very intentionally do not do this because, well, otherwise, of course, we could spend many hours having nice and pleasant conversations, but I believe that those conversations will not help either people of Belarus or people of Russia. So let us concentrate on fighting Putin, let them concentrate on fighting Lukashenko, and of course we will follow what's going on and try to learn from each other.
Leonid, the one common factor with both oppositions is that both are young. That's where you find your support within the youth in Russia. You've had to shut down your offices. You've said that many of these offices, which have been turned into independent regional political organizations, are not going to survive. You've seen people like Ms. Sobol having to withdraw from the parliamentary elections because of being labeled extremist. You've had to move, like you said, to Vilnius, as have other people. Within that space, in the last month and a half, how much of passion is still there within those young people to keep fighting, Mr. Putin, or keep opposing his policies? Have you seen any decrease? Is there nervousness in that entire group, in that age group? Because they're on social media. That's one of the common factors, isn't it?
No, I don't see any decrease. Contrary to that, all the fundamental factors for the protests in Russia are not gone and will not be gone. So even if Mr. Putin would bulldoze away all the physical buildings where our regional offices used to be, this wouldn't help him to do anything with the poverty, corruption, or injustice of the political system. So Putin is trying to to push the protest under the carpet, so to make it less visible, like this when we now are not anymore able to continue our offline operations in Russia as we used to be, as hundreds of thousands of people are being disenfranchised from participation in elections. So when you are not allowed to appear on the ballot, even running for the village council, not only for the State Duma, of course, this very much affects, well, the visible things with the visible artifacts with the political life, but it can't change the attitude fundamentally. Well, this actually only makes people a little bit more angry that they cannot express their political views, assessments using like legal and public tools, that they are not allowed to campaign for their candidates, that they are not allowed to donate money to the organizations they support, and so on and so on. So the fundamental factors are not gone and will not be gone. There is nothing Putin could do against injustice, corruption, or poverty, and people are getting angrier. So of course, this doesn't denote a decrease country. It's actually an increase in dissent in our country, only that it is becoming less visible. And it is of course creating a quite dangerous situation. So a situation when like anything could become a spark that would kind of ignite the situation.
Do you find it worrying that these laws and all the surveillance is becoming part of a arsenal of weapons being used by leaders like President Putin for suppressing free expression, independent media? How, in your opinion, from your perspective, from the Russian perspective, do you reverse a trend like that when young people are obviously looking to voice themselves, but are skirting very dangerously close to breaking laws in place?
Well, first of all, you're right. I mean, like we are having conferences to discuss good practices and, to discuss how to better do this or that. But it looks like Putin, Lukashenko, Maduro, and the likes of them are probably also having their conferences, like sharing the worst practices, discussing how to be a better dictator, how to cause more, how to produce more evil things, and so on. So they're learning from each other, and very fast. So actually, very many things that happened in Belarus happened in Russia in just half a year, and the things Putin very clearly learned, like inherited from Lukashenko. And also some things are going in a backward direction, of course, unfortunately. And yes, it results in a dramatic deterioration of the political situation in our both countries. And what's happening in Russia is of course terrible, when people are being persecuted for very legal forms of participation in political activities, for participation in peaceful rallies, for an attempt to register a political party, for an attempt just to be on the ballot. We have filed papers for registration of our political party 9 times, and we were 9 times rejected, and now we are labeled an extremist organization, being not allowed to exercise any legal form of public political activity in the country. Is it good? No, of course it's not bad. Of course it's very bad. Does it anyhow strip us of our optimism about Russian future? No, not really. Well, the clock is very clearly ticking in our favor. You were already speaking about like young people. They see that Navalny's support among voters under 30 is larger than Putin's support. So he's doing just better in the polls, even being in prison, not on the ballot, not being able to campaign. This situation is not going to change. So people are very tired of Putin. He's there for like 20-something years. Every new re-election, even despite the fact that opposition is not allowed to participate, every new re-election becomes more and more of stress for him. And also, that's something that we've seen in Belarus also, that Lukashenko, after 25 years in power, got into huge problem trying to get re-elected, even with his like fully clean, sterile political system and his system of electoral commission and so on. This will happen in Russia also. So this dictatorship is cruel, but it is not capable to over-survive Mr. Putin. And the next generation of politicians that will arrive will be able to contribute for like democratic and peaceful transition in the country, just because Putin's rule is based on his personal ties and relations, and of course on negative selection. So he doesn't have anyone in our generation who could be like competitive.
We have a question in the room. If you could introduce yourself very quickly, and a quick question, please.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Jake.
Can you take your mask off so we can hear you?
I am Jake. I'm a short-term intern here at the GLOBSEC conference, and I would very much like to hear your opinion on whether the character of Russian politics in the last couple of decades, and well, specifically Putin's authoritarian, so to say, presidential figure, could have influenced the opinions on democracy in Central and Eastern Europe lately. The opinion poll we might have seen on the previous panel in Maria Theresia, for those of you who attended.
Leonid, what do you think of that? Has his politics, has the way he's approached his rule in Russia influenced the CEE?
Well, as we see that Putin learns a lot from Lukashenko, of course, many other dictators or wannabe dictators try to learn something from Putin, because many consider his like political model to be quite attractive. This is and Putin also does a lot for export of corruption to Europe. It's a very natural thing. Like Russia exports enormous amounts of money, of assets being stolen from Russian taxpayers to European countries, and along with this money, a lot of corruption arrives. Like when a Russian deputy minister would buy themselves a villa in Côte d'Azur, they would also very much consider like corrupting local judge, local municipal official, local mayor, local police, because first of all, this is their modus operandi. They used to operate this way back in Russia, and they of course want to continue this style of operations also. And second, because, well, they don't want questions to be asked about source of their funds and so on and so on. And Putin also uses export of corruption as a very natural tool for him to buy influence, to rot the foundations of European political system, to get like engaged with different European politicians. And we see it here and there, more and more European politicians, specifically far right and far left. Putin doesn't care of their political affiliation. It's just important for him that they would contribute to the turbulence in European political system. So more and more far right and far left politicians are quite openly acting as Putin's agents, as his like really like being really like salaried employees of Kremlin. And this is becoming dangerous. And of course, like many political leaders in Central Eastern Europe, first of all, see Putin as a possible source of funds for their political work, and second, as a kind of like inspirational model. Look, like the guy managed to stay in power for 20 plus years and squeeze enormous assets from the economy. Putin is a better role model, and this is one more reason why he is dangerous.
Lena, that brings up an interesting point, that if it's so ingrained, Maria asks, is it possible then to see Russia become more democratic and liberal in the near future, or will this ongoing regime just extend till 2036? I think that's a question to ask, especially considering the position Mr. Navalny is in and what you are talking about.
We don't know when the transition will happen. We are sure that Putinism will not be able to over-survive Mr. Putin because it's a very personalistic regime. Everything is very much built on personal ties that Mr. Putin has with this and this and this and that guy. But we didn't know when the change will come. Putin will not be gone because of an election. It could happen for biological reasons. It can happen because of some black swan type event, like when something like random happens, like the Arab Spring started in March 2011, or it could be like a severe elite split when the political elite will realize that kind of the downsides of keeping Putin as their supreme arbiter start to become more important than the upsides of it. Each of these three scenarios is possible, but we can't really make a prediction when this will happen. We know what should we do when each of these three scenarios, when either of these three scenarios comes true. We have to be the largest and the best organized political force in the country that will stand up and demand for a democratic, peaceful transition, and we will be perfectly capable to do so.
That would bring up, does anyone have a question in the room? Because then I will go to my final question. Oh, yes, please.
Just a very quick question. I see that you are restricted and your organization is actually not having the access to the proper media because it's controlled.
Introduce yourself to Lynn.
Sorry, Zoltán Varga from Hungary. So we have similar experiences in Hungary, what you have actually in Russia. So how do you reach out to the normal people, to the voters? So how the messages from your organization is passed actually to the voters? Because otherwise you control or you have the young generation behind you, but the voters are a little bit older. So how you communicate with the general public? Thank you.
Well, first of all, we do not distinguish young people from general public. Young people are general public. The internet penetration rate in Russia is well over 70%. So it's kind of a stereotype, of course, that only young people are there. The internet penetration rate is like 100% among young people, over 80% in people under 55, and over 60% in people aged 55 plus. So we are perfectly able to be in touch with all generations through social media. But of course, we also kind of ask young voters to be part of our media. We very actively engage them into bringing our message through to their like parents, aunts, elder relatives and so on, because not because their parents don't have access to the internet, but because we believe that the personal message brought through a devout supporter is much stronger than any media coverage and any other way to deliver the message.
That would bring me to one of my final questions, or my final question, because we are running out of time. How do you make that democratic transition at a point when it is so difficult for young people and convince them to stay in the fight despite the consequences that might be waiting for them, whether it's prison, labor camps, or any other consequences?
So we don't have to ask anyone to stay in the fight. Once again, I think it's very important. People within the country have their feelings, their perception that the situation is very bad, the situation is very unfair. People perfectly know that they have been, that all their like democratic rights and human rights have been taken away from them. We don't need to explain it to people. People know that very perfectly. So, and people also are aware of the fact that, well, many tools of like political engagement that have been available for them are not available anymore, that they would face severe risks when trying to engage political in the ways they used to be, in the ways it was legal but is not anymore legal. But this doesn't affect Putin's perception. So the fact that Putin declares us an extremist organization doesn't make him more popular among people, doesn't win him supporters, doesn't convert our supporters to Putin supporters. Quite contrary, even more people think that something very unfair is happening. That's it.
That brings me very nicely to our poll, Leonid, and this was a poll that we ran when this conversation started. The question is Vladimir Putin mostly perceived positively or negatively in Central and Eastern Europe? And I think you are absolutely right with your closing comment, where 83% of those participating and listening to you at this point think of him quite negatively. So I'm not sure that we can be clearer about what the results of the meeting yesterday in Geneva and the conversations we've been having here at GLOBSEC can say more clearly. Leonid Volkov, thank you so very much for your time. We wish you luck in your fight. From all of us here at GLOBSEC, thank you.